So, Jim Addoms is the president of the Atheists, Agnostics, and Freethinkers Alliance at Syracuse University. He's currently doing a double master's program in international relations and public administration at the Maxwell School at Syracuse University. He did his undergraduate work in archaeology at the George Washington University. Is that like the Ohio State University? Okay, yeah, no, we do the same thing at my alma mater as well. And he hopes to pursue work in global governance with particular interest on the intersection of politics and religion in the United Nations, and religion's role in citizen self-identification in supranational organizations and the structures of the British Commonwealth, which is a reminder to me of why I decided not to go into academia, because I think if I was restricted to that narrow of a topic for any length of time, I would go insane. But I am delighted that the grand scheme of human knowledge is advanced by people who have more patience and ability to pay attention for long periods of time than I do. So Jim is going to talk about thinking about your entire semester's programming arc, and I urge you to welcome him.
Oh my goodness, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's a real honor to be asked here today. We're a relatively new student group. This is our second full academic year. We've had a lot of success. We've certainly had some failures and some rocky times. We've also had a lot of success, thankfully. So it's been a pleasure to come here and talk about it. I am the president of the Atheists, Agnostics, Freethinkers Alliance at SU. I'm also the co-founder. I want just a quick background about how I got started with this. I'm an international relations student. So we'd sit in class and we'd say things like, why can't they just get together in Israel and Palestine? Why can't they just find a political solution? It's such an easy problem. There's a particular amount of X number of land and Y number of people, and let's apportion this appropriately. And people would say, yeah, that's exactly right. We'd run simulations, and that sounded like a good idea. But I always thought it was interesting why, and everyone would go home for the weekend, and they do temple, and they do the mosque, and they do the various things, and church, and come back on Monday and pick up the reins of the discussion about the ideological debate, or the political debate. And so the ideology was never really concerned in those debates. And I always said, how interesting would it be for us to kind of immerse ourselves in political responsibility, in religious ownership, and ideological ownership of the problem. Students were not doing that. So I thought, let's have a debate about that. And that grew into other co-founders, other co-sponsors, saying, let's have a debate about atheism on campus, and particularly in academia. So that's where I'm going to focus tonight, I think. I'm timing myself, so I hope, will somebody give me a 2-minute or a 5-minute or a...
yeah, okay. 5 and 2 stop.
So that's where we are. So we started that way, and I want to talk a little bit about our beginnings. Of course, we thought about the name, Atheist, Agnostic, the Out campaign. I thought it was very important that we have atheism in the title. We had this great idea that if we came up with an atheist topic, then we would stand in opposition equally with the religious groups on campus. So we would get equally the same amount of funding, same amount of interest as religious groups on campus. Not, of course, not the case at all. So, but atheist was very important to us in the title. And then there were some people who had kind of intellectual honesty issues about the agnosticism. We thought we'll put them in, so we included that. And then there are some other groups. I don't know if anyone's here tonight or today with that, but we looked at other existing group names, and some included freethinkers. And we knew that we didn't want to go with the James Randi and the just kind of ghosts and things, but we did want to have freethinker in the title, and there are some atheist, agnostic, freethinker groups already in existence, and we thought that was a really good title. So we thought, how do we get organized? And we did it in the following ways, probably very similar to many of you. We tried the MySpace route, and we went to Twitter. We did a little bit of that, and we also thought, let's try Facebook, and that's been our biggest success story so far. So Facebook has been quite amazing. These illustrations are pretty cool too, I think. PowerPoint 2010 is amazing. And so, but we did MySpace, Twitter, and Facebook, which is pretty cool. And then we had the typical kind of handout. So word of mouth was very important for our first group. And we watched The God Who Wasn't There, and everybody's seen that movie maybe, and we had a meeting beyond belief, kind of a small little graphic there. But that's how we first got organized. So a very brief history of Syracuse University, religious history. On I'll knock these out very quickly. 1832. So most schools kind of started with some kind of religious affiliation. Certainly, we're standing on a campus with that history. 1870, there was a Methodist kind of ideological feud, and they also had a debate about moving the campus from Lima, New York, to Syracuse. And Ezra Cornell owned some farmland and in upstate New York, and there was a big feud with him, kind of a benefactor, and he said he would not submit to Syracuse as a location because he had a bad experience with pickpockets and wage garnishing or something at the middle part of the 19th century while he was making his fortunes. And so he said Syracuse was the Sodom and Gomorrah of central New York, and we aim to honor that tradition today a little bit. So, at our work. So that's the brief history, but it's important to know where, kind of the breach that we're stepping into. And again, the university identifies itself as a non-sectarian, although many schools do, and kind of a little bit tied to the United Methodist Church. And that is important because, like a lot of other schools in 1920, in our particular case, that affiliation has kind of been subsumed under kind of a nebulous branch, kind of a little bit separated from the university administration, not quite public, not quite private, and that's kind of the breach that we're stepping into today. And that's under the aegis of both the building and the organization called Hendricks Chapel. And they're all about interfaith dialogue. I think that's the big thing now on campus. And so this is what we're stepping into, and this is a bit from their mission statement. You can kind of read it, but essentially they're saying, your ideology, your particular religious view is just as important as mine, just as real, just as worthwhile. Kind of some interfaith problems there, I think. It's kind of ideological difficulties, not very intellectually honest. So I thought this is also starting to create a place where we can step into as a secular organization. So there's a bit of a rift there with a lot of students, and we're trying to kind of, I wouldn't say exploit that, but we are examining it. So again, Hendricks Chapel gets a lot of the funding from our student organization, 11 student groups. They're funded privately through Hendricks Chapel, but they're also funded through our main, as I was talking about, through one of the main sources, which is the student kind of appropriations process. And every student at Syracuse University is assessed a $40, I think it's $45 now fee, and it's compulsory. You have to do it to be a Syracuse University student. It's a programming fee, and that's very standard across the board. But of that fee, some of these student groups for overtly religious program get their funding from Hendricks Chapel, but many get their funding from the pool that we're applying for. So again, just very quickly, these are the kind of the student groups, not unusual at all, kind of a mismatch there, but also 11 chaplaincies at Hendricks Chapel. And again, you can kind of see not that unusual until we get kind of to the newest chaplaincy, and we were talking about a little bit before, the pagan chaplaincy. And I think that's kind of very interesting, because what does it mean to be a secular student group if you have the pagans talking about green issues and all these other groups saying, let's all be inclusive, few issues are not a problem, and we're all very inclusive? What kind of territory do we have to reclaim and approach issue for fundraising? And so this is kind of if you don't mind the bouncing graphic here. We just had the pagan group come in, and this kind of reminds me, I think this is kind of an interesting debate about how we coexist, how we get together, and what it means to be a secular group. So we've all seen this, I think. It's probably a pretty famous logo. And a lot of pagan groups and various things are doing this. This is kind of has the Abrahamic tradition kind of represented, and this one has a male and female kind of coexist, we'll all get together. And then, of course, we can't forget the merchandising. And this little guy here, some kind of riot police Lego guy coexists online. I thought that was pretty funny. But I think the most interesting thing is that we have a huge kind of coexist movement in culture right now. And that's something that at Syracuse we found very important to again, I don't want to say exploit, but to address, because there's some people who are not very happy with this intersection. They're saying that there are some things that do not coexist and do not really work ideologically together. So this is from a famous band. You guys will know who that's from. And this is your friend of mine, the international development expert and former pop star Bono, wearing the Coexist eye shield there. And so it asks some questions, I think. I mean, where are we going with this? You know, can't we all just get along? Can't we coexist? And I think the answer is yes and no. Certainly we want to peacefully coexist on campus. There's no question about that. But these ideologies are not, they're not coexistent. They don't coexist very easily, not intellectually honestly anyway. And so this is the niche kind of that we're finding on our campus that's very successful. So some of these ideologies cannot comfortably coexist in that kind of setting. They just can't. You can't go to school, in my view, and many others at Syracuse, can't go to school and think that the Israel-Palestine problem is very easily solved on a Friday, and then go to temple and go be religious and go to church and go to your mosque on Saturday and Sunday and do those things, and then come back and say, why can't they find a political solution? There are differences. There are real differences on campus, and I think this is a place where we can kind of explore and come together. So, right. So this is a little bit. What do we think the religious campus group is, and what's the secular campus group? This is kind of a funny thing. This is not the case anymore, though. I wish it were, because it's really easy to disapprove of this. This is really easy to remove this, but what it actually looks like now, people wouldn't spend the social capital to invest in an ideology like this. They are doing these kind of things. So I don't know whether you can read this or not. It says, homosexuality is sin, Christ can set you free. Not an unusual sight, I'm sure, on many college campuses. But that's a member of a local campus crusade. I think she's sentiment to some. It doesn't necessarily kind of everything about the interfaith movement and the coexist movement. There are kind of views that aren't in line with secular liberalism, and they're actually very real views on campus. So that's only half the picture, literally. This is the rest of it. And the gentleman to the left is saying, who is a member of our student group, saying corduroy skirts are a sin. And there's a counter-protest, and there was a further counter-protest as well, right around the street. This is kind of a huge intersection of our campus, and so even more student groups are saying, many of them secular students, and some certainly religious, in that view. So I put that down with the secular campus group. That's what it means to me to be a secular group. And then the religious groups as well. This statement I thought was pretty interesting. We're expecting a baby, even though we have nothing in common. I know marriage is the right thing. So I think that's a local, publicly funded group. I think free thinking is about kind of unpacking the right thing, and I think we do that quite well on our group. So these are some other folks kind of protesting and pro-choice and various things, pro-women's rights, pro-reproductive rights, pro-health education. But with that said, this was a huge thing on our campus, actually. Did anyone hear about the origin of the schools? Yes, okay. So this was pretty ridiculous, and I contacted the local religious groups, and I said, when are you coming to our campus? And they said Friday. I can't remember the exact date. Friday we're coming, we're handing out copies of the Origin of Species with this very unusual introduction with kind of some information change. And I thought, great, we're going to mobilize our group to be there on Friday. We're going to respectfully interact with you. And they said, fine. And they changed the date at the very last minute to be a Thursday kind of distribution. So we missed that entirely. And all the religious groups that I was interacting with kind of were sheepish and we didn't know and we weren't really sure about it. So we didn't get a chance to interact that way, but we sure wanted to. And that's again what a religious group means to me. So so the interaction that, of course, we did have, this is informing our response. Let's have P.Z. Myers talk about what he thinks, how religion and science can coexist. So I think the tagline there is pretty small, but how faith makes us wrong. So I mean that's a definite point that he's making there. So again, this is all informing a semester programming arc, and yeah. So we came up with a lecture series in perspective from the fields of evolutionary biology, constitutional law, activism, ethics, and sexuality. And we thought, well, these are crossroads of our debate, and they're not being covered. There's an interfaith dialogue about it, but lines aren't really being drawn, and nothing's really being accomplished. We're not really discussing this. We're saying everybody can coexist. You can think various things about sexuality. It's okay to think that obstructionist health education is okay. I'm going to debate a little bit. We thought, no, it's not okay. There's some things that we think are not okay. And we're drawing the line and saying, oh, let's have a debate about it. And so we did that in the form of a semester-long lecture series. And this is kind of the branding that we were doing. So we had a semester-long poster that was up for the whole semester. And we would put it up again as needed. It was up for about 3 months. It's still up. We have one more speaker, so it continues to be up on campus. And we thought branding is very important. So then we had individual lectures, event-specific flyers for each attendee. So again, we're just kind of doing this kind of thing. And the amount of money we were able to get from our student association and the funding appropriation process, I think, was increased because we were doing a lecture series. And it was kind of a more academic thing. So we're not processing church as some other groups do. We're not doing various things. But we are doing this kind of, I think, academically minded lecture series. So we seem to do well in the funding process because of that. And then very quickly ending, we are, the funding is, I think, very interesting. So this is, again, graphs are always great. This is our funding here. We're on the very left, we're the very small dark blue box, and that's our first spring 2009 was, I think, a lecture series, or it was a movie and maybe some refreshments. Fall 2009 was Dan Barker. He's a great speaker. Spring 2010 was our lecture series, but again, the middle box is the average religious group getting funding from our student association. So again, you can kind of see how we're not quite in parity yet until this coming fall. But still, the lightest blue box is all of the student funding from that mandatory student fee going to religious programming. So we think that's pretty interesting. And if we do get our budget requests in fall, with Christopher Hitchens and some other speakers, we'll be slightly above the average. Of course, nowhere near all of the religious funding from Syracuse University, mandatory student fee. And we also do try to engage local freethought groups. These were already in place, and they're fantastic. They do a lot of great work. They're on street festivals, and they go to all kinds of different events, passing out literature. They have a great membership already. They do collect dues. They had some funding available for us to kind of tap into. This is Central New York. Skeptics, they do some great things, and also Freethinkers of upstate New York. And they were fantastic also for helping us just kind of, I mean, they're doing ex-faculty members, current faculty, they're getting together and having these kind of very free-form talks. We're able to take that membership and say, we have the money from a large research institution, let's get it together, tie it in with your membership, with your interests, and let's make something happen. They were, once they knew about us, it was a giant leap from what the membership that we had when we first started to what they were able to offer from the community. It was fantastic. So I really think everybody should kind of approach that. And that's pretty much it. So I think that's kind of creating a semester arc and engaging the local community. So I want to thank you all for talking. I really appreciate it.
If you want to answer a couple of questions during the break, that's
sure. I'd be happy to answer questions. Sure.
If anybody has any?
You guys are aware it's FU New York, right?
What? It is FU New York, yeah. But it's Freethinkers, right? It's FUNY, it's FU New York. Yeah, exactly. That was the debate about should we be an FU and SU. That was the big debate. FU and SU. That was thrown around a little bit, but I mean that's a particular way to go. I mean, yeah, right. Are you familiar with the FUNY FU New York group at all?
Not particularly.
No.
But our campus group used to be called HASH, the Harvard Atheists, Skeptics, and Humanists. We just changed it this year to be a little bit less overtly confrontational.
Got it. Yes.
Have you thought of marketing a atheist or non-theist symbol in the coexist? Changing the S to some.
I hadn't thought of that. I mean, maybe that's a fundraising point of view there. But I guess as this makes pretty evident, I think the coexisting is kind of I think it's kind of a silly kind of almost more like commodity. It's kind of like an ideological fetishism thing. I think it's a little bit silly. But maybe for marketing or bumper stickers or something, yeah, maybe that's something we could pursue.
I've seen a version of the coexist symbol where the E, it's kind of like a curvy E, and underneath it says equals MC squared. So it's like represents science.
Anybody else?
All right.
Well, thank you very much.